Welcome back, Flyers nitty-gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili, Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, brother?
Oh, doing really well, Yariv. Good to, be back on the show. The Flyers have been faring a lot better as of late, just in terms of their play. You know, just compared to like the other shows that we've had and we've kind of gone through, like last week, for example, right? Like they have the big win against the Ducks, and beforehand, they're playing really well but not getting the results. Whereas the last 5 games here now, they're 4-0-1 in the last 5. So we're kind of seeing that process pay off in the results. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, dude. It's been a pleasure to watch this team of late. And it's such a contrast. I couldn't wait for December to end, and so far January has fared much better than the month of December. It's like so weird how that happens in hockey, where it's like 1 month your team will be just bad, and then the next month, like things will kind of turn around because competition is still been tough.
So many games, and I think for hockey, the main important thing, especially for this Flyers team, where consistency is a little bit of
An issue
sometimes. Exactly. I think, when they do have those stretches where they lull in play, it's important for them not to lose focus and like their whole structure. And even though they might not be getting certain points, like still playing well, right? And that's kind of what was happening the last few weeks, when they played LA out of the Christmas break, the Leafs, Vegas, playing some really good teams, just not getting the results. And we were kind of worried that, hey, if they don't start getting that soon, is that process going to continue? And, with getting some results after those Leafs games, they have been able to, continue the process. And we're seeing, the team play some really, really good hockey here, especially in this latest win against the Devils, right? One of the best teams in the league, and really limiting them defensively. That's surprising to see them, kind of lock the Devils down so much.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure. They've looked a lot like the Flyers of last year.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Very similar. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot of what they've been doing right. A lot of things are starting to come together a little bit, and we'll see how things are as we move forward. But so far, a nice turnaround, and we're going to go through this in full detail. So I'm already ready to talk about this stuff. So let's do the usual spiel, and then we'll get right into the show. So just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications. To get notified on when we release episodes. For the next month or so, a little bit over a month, the schedule is going to be different. I'm in Israel. I'm 7 hours ahead. So Vasili and I are recording on Sundays now. So episodes will be out like Sunday afternoon. And maybe it'll work for the future. We don't know. But typically we try to move around Flyers games. So definitely hit the notification bell for those updates. And then the audio versions go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a follow and a rating there if you can. Again, this is the best way to support our site, is the likes, the subscriptions, the follows, the ratings. That helps our show grow. So if you haven't done that so far, please do so now. We really appreciate it. And also shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim Steaks. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Again, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. It's cold. I hear it's about to snow in Philadelphia, so maybe wait out the snow, but afterwards go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. And I'm sure it probably is snowing in Toronto
not right now, but it has snowed. It's about to be like a deep freeze here, where you get like negative 20 Celsius, so like almost like
God,
yeah, almost like 10 Fahrenheit, something like that. Yeah.
That sounds awful.
So don't come to Toronto anytime soon.
I'm at I think 18 degrees Celsius here. So that for those who are, I think 18. No, that might be too high. I'm bad at the Celsius conversion, but it's
you're what, like 65, 70 Fahrenheit?
65 to 70 every day and sunny.
Oh,
so
Jesus, I'm jealous of you.
My home country, dude. One of my 2 countries, and best time to leave America is during the winter. I'll say that, at least in the East Coast.
For sure, yeah.
At least where we live. Okay. Also, want to give a shout out to Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. They will be your weapon against the insurance companies. They will help facilitate the entire process between your insurance company. They'll make sure you get the best claim you can. They'll deal with all the paperwork and all of the headaches that come with dealing with insurance companies. So use Summit Public Adjusters to help facilitate that process and make it a more successful journey for you when you're dealing with a stressful time. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Also, want to give a brief shout out to our partner, SportsSpider.com. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, make sure to check out SportsSpider.com. The link for SportsSpider is in the description. They are our partners. Our stuff, when it's released, is pinned to the top. So make sure to check them out. You help us, you help them, and it's a mutual partnership. Okay, let's get right into it. So we don't really have news, but we have a lot of good stuff to talk about, which has been rare of late. You know, if you go back a few weeks, like a lot of our headlines were more negative. We were talking about trades. We were talking about, struggles, confusion, worrying if we were going to be completely out of the playoff race, come the second half of the season. Things have seemed to kind of be flipped on its head. We don't know how long that will last, but as of right now, things are looking good. So, and we talked about this when it happened, and we both kind of felt this, and I'm sure other people felt it as well, but that win against the Ducks, that really did feel like a momentum-changing game, right? They rallied around this Cutter Gauthier game. They came out, they played the best game they've played in probably 12 months or something like that. And they really took it to the Ducks. The Ducks aren't a good team, but they played as close to a perfect game as you can, winning 6-0, embarrassing Cutter Gauthier, and he even ended up having a good game the following game, I believe, but just couldn't do anything. The Flyers bullied all over him. They kind of ruined his arrival to Philadelphia for the first time. But it does seem in general that the Flyers' play has improved. They fell short against Columbus, though I would argue they were still the better team. They lose in a shootout, but they have been playing much better hockey in general. And I would say even that game against the Blues, it was not a disappointing game from the sense that you weren't watching them as like, they're a mess, they're embarrassing, the goaltending is playing terrible. And, Fedotov did okay. He didn't shit the bed. He lost in a shootout, which is not his strength, let's be honest. That's a situation you probably would want Kolosov or Ersson in net for that type of situation. But so far, things have changed. What are your thoughts about that overall?
Yeah, I just think, right, if you're looking at that Ducks game, particularly as an inflection point and as a point where things are kind of turning around here for the Flyers in their season, just based upon the play beforehand, I think it's a great thing to kind of pinpoint, right? Like, sure. Think about the 4 games before that, right? Losses to the Stars, really bad loss. Didn't have it all in that one. Beforehand, right? 2 losses to the Leafs where they probably should have won that game. Lost to Vegas where they could have beat them. Lost to the Kings earlier where they could have beat them, right? So I think we've talked about it for a couple weeks that they had a really strong stretch of play, but just weren't seeing the results. So I think the team was playing really well. They were realizing that, hey, if we keep playing in this manner, we're going to be able to get these results. And I'm just glad that they can kind of use that Ducks game as a confidence booster, because that's what I really think it has been for this team, right? Playing really well, same type of process against the Ducks, but just everything kind of went right for them. Whereas those other games against some, really top tier teams in the league, they weren't really able to get those results. But now we're kind of seeing that, especially after that Panthers win. I think that Panthers win followed up by the Ducks win is just so crucial, right? You're beating the Stanley Cup champs, defending Stanley Cup champs in regulation, firstly, and doing so after being down 2-0 early, right? Like, for the Flyers to come back in that game, it just shows the resilience of this team. And I think it also just shows the resilience in general, this stretch, when you kind of look and compare it to the stretch prior, right? It's easy to say where the Flyers were in the standings for them to kind of pack it up and not really continue to play that strong process game because they weren't getting the results. But they continued with that, and I think you have to give kudos to John Tortorella and the coaching staff. Sure. And when I talked to the staff when I was in Toronto for the game, they said that that's the thing that's the hardest for them right now. That the team's playing well, but they have to find a fine line between, preaching, continuing to play this way, and having the team actually execute that because they weren't getting results. But
Yeah.
it seems that they were able to, keep them engaged, keep them motivated, and it's paid off here because they're 4-0-1 in the last 5. And when you're kind of just looking at the playoff race here, like if I bring up the wild card standings, this stretch is crucial, right? Like they're still only 2 points back now of that final wild card spot that the Senators hold at 50 points. The Flyers at 48 points right now, tied with Montreal, and Boston is ahead of them by 2 with 50 points. So, for example, right, if the slide continues here and they do not get the points in this latest stretch, they're probably out of the mix completely for the rest of the season. So this was a crucial point for them in the season, and I think they've really turned it around. They've given themselves a shot here at least to be in the mix up until I think the Four Nations break. So we'll kind of see how it goes. But even with the games coming up here, Yariv, right? Like there's a couple games here that are going to be really big because they're playing teams around them, right? They have a game coming up against the Red Wings, Rangers, Islanders a couple of times. So this is going to be pretty crucial stretch. So we'll kind of see if they can use, we'll kind of see if they could use these last 4 or 5 games and the confidence that's been built to go on even a bigger run here, because I think the team's playing the best they have all season.
Yeah, you're not kidding, dude. Actually, if you really look at the schedule, so it's they just beat the Devils. They're going to be playing Detroit next, then the Rangers, then the Islanders again, then the Devils again, then the Devils again. Then the Islanders.
Lots of divisional games.
Again.
Right?
And then they play Colorado. So this is going to be maybe a season-defining moment.
Stretch,
now, I don't think they have to come away necessarily with a winning record there to stay in it, but they got to at least come out at 500%, if they want to, be relevant as the season moves forward. They can't shit the bed, in these upcoming games. If they come away with a winning record, we might see them in a wild card spot by the end of it. That's, especially
that's how close these standings are, right? For any team, I would say.
It's like last season.
Pretty much, if each team in this little group or bubble, if one of them goes on a run, they're pretty much putting themselves ahead of the pack. So I think it's going to be similar to last year, right? You're going to see a race right down till the wire, probably last day of the season. For the Flyers and a lot of the young guys on this team, you would think that their goal is going to be to try to make the playoffs. That would be the next step for them here.
Yeah.
And I just think for the young players, you want to see this team in the mix as long as possible because it's going to be best for their development, right? You want younger guys playing important games down the stretch to kind of learn what it takes to be in these situations and win in these situations. Even if they end up losing and fall short, it's still a good learning experience, especially for guys like a Michkov, guys like a Drysdale, to really learn and understand what it takes to win down the stretch in the NHL at this, crucial point in the year, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, not just the Anaheim game was defining. I really looked at that Islanders game. Obviously Maxim Tsiplikov was suspended 3 games after his hit. That should have been a 5-minute major. I see people arguing online that it was shoulder. I have no idea what the hell people are talking about. It was clear shot to the head. He missed the shoulder. He possibly grazed it a little bit.
He grazed it maybe, but
he went up. Now he didn't leave his feet. I'll give him credit there, but he did go up towards the head. I don't think his intention was to hit Paling's head. I will say that. I think he was going for the shoulder. The game moves really fast, but at the end of the day, you hit the head. You concuss the player. You put him in a dangerous situation. That is, at the very least, 2 minutes. Clearly should have been a 5-minute major. The Flyers were obviously rattled. Then the terrible missed call on the power play or on the penalty kill for the Flyers, where that's an obvious slash on TK. They end up scoring. The game could have gone completely off the rails to them, and you gave John Tortorella credit. And I completely agree. I think the coaching staff has been really good at keeping things calm. Things could have definitely spiraled for the team, but they have not. And it seems like every single time you want to count John Tortorella out, he somehow manages to rally again. It just shows his veteran coaching status of how he's dealt with these situations so often, how he didn't freak out. You never saw him calling players out in the media. You never saw him freaking out or saying, I'm out of answers. He was having no goaltending help, and we're going to talk about Ersson in the second half of the show. And, he just kind of I think it's also credit to the leaders above him, right? Briere and Jones, is that they're obviously not panicking. If they were panicking, that would have gone down on John. That would have gone down to the rest of the coaching staff, and then to the rest of the players. And that doesn't seem to be the attitude. And that's the nice luxury of not competing for a Stanley Cup yet, is that you don't have to panic. The Flyers are ready for all scenarios moving forward. Lawton was also handed a fine there. Fine, whatever. But I think
well, he's standing up for a teammate. I think at that point, it's obvious that the Flyers want to stand up for Poehling, and they kind of rallied around that. And I think
yes, they did.
That hit, it was a turning point for them in the sense that they could have tried to chase around Siplikov and a bunch of other Islanders. They didn't, right? Like, they beat them on the scoreboard ultimately, and that's where you're going to hurt a team most. I do think for that Siplikov hit, like, when you're just coming across like the way he did, you have to be so careful as a player. Like you said, the game moves so fast. Yeah. I think for the refs, just the fact that he chose to come across, like when you're a player, when you're coming across against a guy like that, typically they're not able to see you from that angle. So you're essentially blindsiding him. And that's pretty much what he did to Poehling, right? He blindsides Poehling. He blindsides Poehling, and that's a huge missed call. Probably,
I don't get it.
I tweeted out during the game, and like, I'm not one to really put officiating as a huge impact. Like, usually the better team's going to win despite the officiating doing a bad job. But I even tweeted during that game that, like, 3 outrageously missed calls there in that first period that could have really impacted the game negatively, and the Flyers could have lost due to that, right? Like, they should have had a major penalty. Don't get that. That TK miss on the slash ends up being a goal. So not a good showing for the refs, no. But the Flyers are able to overcome there. And it's just crazy to me that people were saying, oh, it's shoulder to shoulder, where you can clearly see that, okay, he might have grazed the shoulder there, but he definitely hits the head. And the fact that Poehling snaps his head back is all the evidence that you need, right? Like, you're not going to be making that motion if your head is not, contacted in some way. So
it like him going, like, flying is not necessarily the problem. If it would have been shoulder on shoulder and he would have gone flying, he wouldn't have been concussed. He maybe would have hurt his shoulder. He maybe would have had some other kind of injury. But the fact that he got concussed, it wasn't like his head hit the ice or something. There was a clear shot to the head. So I have no idea why I see people online. And I actually, like, I stopped arguing with everybody online on everything. But like this, I couldn't help myself. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Like, this was reviewed by the league afterwards, and it's pretty conclusive. They just missed the call during the game, even for the review. But I'm really proud of the Flyers, the way they handled that one. I think they were, throughout the game, the better team. The Islanders did show some life at the end there, but again, more signs that the Flyers are kind of on task. And I know Poehling is traveling with the team, and that's from Charlie O'Connor, so that's a good sign. But, he could be out, a couple weeks. If it's mild, it could be longer if it's something serious. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But let's get, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the offense. We're going to go line by line, and then we're going to, in the second half, we'll talk about the defense and the goaltending, and then we'll end with like phantoms and prospect stuff, which there isn't too much there, but let's talk about the Flyers' top line. So we were definitely frustrated with Frost, of late. He has seemed to have turned it around. I argue, again, that it's playing with Tippett. I think the top line is working together, but they weren't working until Frost got there. I think Tippett and Frost work together. The fact that TK and Mitch Cobb play the same position is a problem, and I still want to see those two together. But the lines have been working, so I'm not complaining. As of right now, my complaints have gone away. I still think that there's still some tweaking that can be done, and the third line is still together, understandably so. And we're going to talk about Kate specifically. But Travis Konechny, I mean, throughout this stretch, he's had multiple multi-point games, just setting up goals. This top line has been very good. Tippett has come up with some big goals. Frost has had some big goals. TK has kind of been all over the place. Setting, like, he had that beautiful setup for Hathaway on the shorthanded goal the other day. It's just more proof that TK just succeeds wherever he is. And man, that guy is a star. Right now, he is tied 10th overall on his own in points in the NHL. And again, for all those people who said he wasn't a first line player, it just shows that, like, this whole mindset of players hit their peak at 22, 23 3. I still have no idea where that comes from. I'm sure there's some data to back that up, but I would not go off of that. And TK did what we were hoping. He's hit another level. I mean, the guy is on pace for a 40 goal, 95-point season at this pace. And I go back to the offseason. We were talking about a trade for Mitch Marner and whether we'd have to add. And I kept saying, like, I would only give up Konechny for Mitch Marner, which I still think is an even swap. Marner's a fantastic player. He's actually better defensively than TK too. So that does add to it. But like what TK is doing this year, you look at that type of trade, not that would even happen at this point, but like the value on paper now lines up
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because TK he's arrived. So what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much summed it up well. There's not too much for me to add.
Sorry.
I would say, at least for Konechny, right? Like that Islanders game, that's one where you point out, like, he's your best player. Paling gets hit. Team needs to respond emotionally. He put the team on his back in that scenario, gets 3 assists, and really drives him to a victory. And I think he's kind of been doing that for this team all season when, they need somebody to step up, or they need that big play, or they need something to kind of get them going. Konechny seems to be that player that's kind of bringing them into the fight and then also producing offensively for them as well. And it's crazy to think, right? Like, he's got 54 points, already this season, 10th in the league in scoring, and that's in 47 games, so 21 goals, 33 assists. And just think about the company that he's surrounding, right? Like Jack Hughes, 9th in the league, 55 points. Jack Eichel, 8th, 56. Kyle Connor, 7th, 60 points. Mikko Rantanen, 63 points at 6. And then below him, you have Scheifele with 53, Jesper Bratt with 52, Cale Makar, 52, Pasternak, 51, Natchez 51, Reinhardt 51. So all those guys, right? Like, he's in a really, really good company.
He's in elite
right
territory. Yep.
Exactly. And I think, like, based on the contract this past season, right, 8.5 million for the next 8 years, if he, even keeps this up for 5-6 seasons, and you see him tail off to end the kind of the contract as typically would happen with, getting a little bit older as an NHL player, it's a bargain of a deal, right? Like the production he's putting up right now for the money you're going to be paying him going ahead. Like, he should really be paid like a 10 million player plus. So I think for the Flyers, you're looking at it and you're saying this is already starting to seem like a steal of a deal, and it's only really about to be your year one here. So if you're Philadelphia, you can't complain really. And you have to also think he's doing this, and Matvei Michkov's only a rookie, and he hasn't even really played with him all that much this season. So imagine when these guys get to play with each other going forward potentially. Or you just have to look at it this way. Like, do the Flyers really have 2 other bona fide first line players right now that you could point at and say, yeah, these guys are first line on any other team in the league right now? No, they don't. And he's putting up this many points, right? So you got to think down the line here over this contract, if they start to add, those bona fide first line level talents or more talented offensive players here, how much will he be able to produce, right? And that's even with the power play being still garbage, 20th in the league. So you just got to look at it that way, that I think the ceiling for even higher offensive production is possible just based on the circumstances right now, which is crazy to think. So he's really surpassing all expectations I had this season. Like, I personally thought it was a really good contract. It's just making us look even better, obviously, by the way he's producing and kind of how we talked about in the offseason. But he's been really, really good for them right now.
Yeah, I still think the Flyers should consider changing stuff up at a certain point. Not now, because they're playing well, so I wouldn't make any line changes.
3 lines are rolling,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could argue 4 lines until Paling went out, too, because the 4th line was looking better. But I would like to see Farabee switch with TK and try to put that line together with TK and Michkov. I don't know if we're going to see anything like that, but I'm interested. I'm interested to see Farabee with Tippett and Frost too. It's a combination we've been talking about for a while, and we haven't seen it since last year. And so let's talk about the other. I don't know what the second line is. I guess you can kind of consider it the Cates line by ice minutes right now. They are technically the third line. Whatever. We don't really know. We don't know because it's
Yeah.
changing every night, and it's understandably so changing every night. I mean, you could argue that Kate's line's the
It's like
top line right
whatever.
now.
It's like whatever team is, or not whatever team, whatever
Whatever
line's playing
line.
better. It seems like Tortorella's giving them the minutes, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't have to rely on one line, and you don't have to overextend certain guys. So let's say one line's going, give them 20 minutes that night. The other line's going another night, give them 20 minutes, right? You kind of keep guys fresh that way, which is smart, actually.
It's the Flyers' strength because they
Yeah.
lack a clear top one line. They have to be able to attack all four lines. Like that's the only way this team can really
Yeah.
beat better teams in the league.
Agreed.
Because they can't match up, especially because of the lack of the true number one center. It's always going to be an issue for them until they solve that problem. So let's talk about the Coots line, which they did play. I guess the least amount of minutes, well, second least amount of minutes to the fourth line. They didn't get a ton of ice time, but they did play well. Over this past 5 games, Michkov has 2 goals, 2 assists. He's a +1. So definitely an improvement for him because he was very cold up until recently. Sean Couturier has been putting up a little bit of points. He set up the important Michkov goal the other night to give the Flyers the tie. So all of that was huge. And it's interesting to see how effective the benching really is, dude. I mean, like benching Farabee, and again, Farabee wasn't
Comes back with 2 assists, right? So
yeah, it does. The players seem to respond to it, whether we hate it or not, which I don't like it either. It does seem to be effective. Like it is the only real tangible incentive you have for the players are ice times and starting starting lineup
of course. And I would say too, right? Like we look at Farabee and we think of him as a veteran at this point, just because he's been on the team since 18 years old. But he's really only 24, and I think you also have to factor in that like 24 years old isn't really old. Like he's still a young player, and like I think even for him, right? Like he was playing well, but the points weren't coming, and I think this 2 games might serve as a really good reset for him, right? Like it's been a busy schedule, kind of reset, look in the mirror, say to yourself, hey, like reflect on the fact that I have been playing well. The points have not been coming, but I just need to continue to play in this way and kind of do the same things. And it is going to work, right? And I said it in the past, like I've always been a big fan of Couturier and Farabee as a duo together. Like I think they've been effective with each other in the past. They've, created offense with each other in the past. And I just don't have, any issue at all with the team kind of putting those two together and then having Michkov be the third person on that line. Like, I think that could almost be the equivalent of a top line for you if you needed it to be. Like, they're not playing them in that manner, but I think they could take on those types of minutes. So it is interesting the way they're structuring it. But yeah, that line, I thought it was their best line against, like, one of their best lines against the Islanders. They were really good. Obviously, against the Islanders, Couturier gets the goal. Farabee 2 assists. Michkov gets a point as well. And then that Devils game here, Michkov gets the important goal. Couturier gets a helper, but they also just had some, shifts and had some chance creation in that game where they were really dictating the play. I thought like it was a defensive battle, but I thought they were the most effective in terms of like extended ozone pressure in the Devils zone. They had a couple of shifts where they were, cycling around and kind of keeping the puck in the zone. So I thought it was a really impactful line for them in that game, and it's a good thing to see because the Flyers are really over relying on Kate's Brink and Forrester as their kind of only line that was going. So the fact that we're seeing other lines also have that same impact of being able to pressure other teams, keep them in in the defensive zone, kind of make other teams tired, right? Tire them out. I think that's a big goal of the Flyers here, is that since you don't have that number one line, let's roll out 3-4 lines and try to kind of tire the other teams out with our forecheck, with our transition play and have it work out for us. So yeah, that Couturier line's been really, really good. I thought they, created a bunch of chances. So it's good to see that not only Michkov's kind of finding a line where things are clicking from a game-to-game basis, at least for the last couple here, but also good to see Farabee get back in and have some success because he was playing really well. So I just think, when you are playing well, to kind of get the points to fall for you, that can only do wonders for the confidence, especially after being scratched.
Yeah. And I do still notice I don't have them like written down or anything, but there have been some plays where Michkov has set up players and they haven't been able to finish still. So it was nice to see him score a goal. I'm hoping, it's one of those things that we kind of saw back in the day with the Briere, Hartnell, and Ville Leno line that took the, it was one of the most dominant lines for the Flyers that went to the Stanley Cup. It was three guys struggling. Michkov has been struggling, Farabee has been struggling, Coots has been struggling offensively, right? All three of them being put together at once, maybe they can find it together. So I'm hoping that line continues to get better, because they seem to be getting better together.
Yeah, I agree.
Not just
Exactly.
they had one good game, but it's like every game they seem to be slightly more effective.
The chemistry seems to be clicking, and they seem to kind of be understanding, okay, where is this guy going to be on the ice at this certain point? But I'm not surprised in the sense that that's happening, because it's three really smart players, right, in terms of hockey IQ, with Couturier, Farabee, and Michkov. So they both think the game at a really high level. So just the fact that they're aware of, okay, I put the puck over here, I know he's going to be there. Like, you're going to learn that as you start to play with guys more often. So that's not too surprising. I just hope they keep them together and don't shuffle it around, because I really like the line. I think it could be an effective line for them, not only defensively, because you have Couturier and Farabee, but also a plus line for you offensively too. So
100%, bro. So let's talk about the big line. Let's talk about the Cates line. You messaged me and said that Cates is looking like Jordan Staal of late, which I thought was a pretty good comparison there. And the thought
is, want to say Mike Richards, sort of cut you off with Flyers comparisons, but
especially that goal he scored. What was it again? It was against the Islanders.
Yeah,
it was against the Islanders, where he kind of pushes the puck forward, dekes out the goal. He's there with Brink.
Nice backhand forehand.
Yeah, like that reminded me of like a little bit of like the Richards goal from the playoffs against the Canadians. Kind of just willing his way to the net. And I do want to talk about, we already know how well that line has been playing. Bobby Brink has been playing well, especially on his forecheck. He's such a different player in both zones than he was last year, and he's still got the offensive touch. I'm really interested to see how he evolves. You even heard the announcers, at least the feed I was watching, that he reminds them of TK. It's like there is something there. There's still more of a ceiling for him, for Forrester, and I look at Cates' ceiling, and I feel like I'm more high on his offensive ceiling than other people. And people kind of see him as like a 40-point guy at most, 50 points. The way he's playing right now, if he can learn to play that way on a very regular basis, like he might actually end up being a second line center capable, maybe not throughout his whole career, but maybe like the peak of his career. He could end up being a 60-point guy if he continues to play the way that he's playing now. And I don't know if he's going to continue to do this offensively, but he's been so good everywhere. I mean, he's always been really good at both ends of the ice, but you contrast it from the beginning of his season and the fact he lost his roster spot to an 18-year-old kid, doesn't complain, nobody cares. He works his way up, and now he's like the backbone. He's our number one center right now. Even if he's not playing number one center, he is the best center on the team. He's playing that way. He's taken over Coots' spot as the top defensive center at this point. I also have not given up on Coots. It might take him longer to get back to where we're hoping, or at least closer to, than 1 or 2 seasons. I know a lot of people think it's like the end for him, but I don't really buy any of that. But Cates, on the other hand, like makes himself so valuable to this team, and he is an RFA, and I imagine the Flyers will probably give him a very long-term contract if they can, and try to keep his total down. But he's a guy that I could see the Flyers like never wanting to give away.
Yeah, from a roster management perspective, right? Like, just think about his biggest skills. The biggest thing that he's bringing to the table, obviously, is his defensive play, hockey IQ. Just understands where to be on the ice defensively to ensure that the other team isn't, taking advantage of, the current line that's on the ice, but also just not giving the other team much to work with, right? Like, when that line is on the ice, first of all, when they're in the defensive zone, like Cates, Brink, Forster, right? Most of the time, the other team is on the perimeter. They're not giving them anything on the inside. And typically when that line's on the ice, right, they're driving play considerably. They usually have the puck. They're usually trying to cycle down low in the offensive zone. And if they don't have the puck, they're forechecking to get it. And they're usually putting the work in to get that puck and retrieve it. And we saw that last night on the power play, right? Like, they have this line out there on the power play, and they're kind of almost not setting it up traditionally. They're like doing a little bit of work behind the net, winning a board battle,
just playing the way they play.
Exactly, kind of freeing it up. and then they find Brink out front, and he gives them the lead, in a crucial spot in that game late. So I just think the way they're playing, super tenacious. Obviously, the fact that the goals have started to come, I think for all three of the guys, it's just been a huge confidence builder for them, right? I think they were playing really well beforehand. The goals weren't really coming for a lot of them, like maybe earlier, probably after the Christmas break, right? We saw they were playing super well. The goals just weren't coming for that line, like in the sense that like it wasn't as often. I think now you're kind of seeing their production on a game-to-game basis just be consistent, right? Like if it isn't Forrester scoring, it's Brink. If it isn't Brink, like we saw against the Islanders, it's Cates. So these guys are really feeding off each other. And then when you just look at like expected goals percentage in the league right now, this is courtesy of Money Puck, but they're the 22nd best line in the NHL currently in terms of expected goals percentage. That's a 65.1% rating. So that just shows that they're one of the best lines in the league right now, driving play, creating, high quality chances, and also just in terms of other teams being able to capitalize against them because they're so offensive right now. They're, so able to kind of force the puck into the other team's defensive zone. Other teams aren't able to capitalize against them. So it's really making them a threat in both ways right now.
Yeah, no, totally. Very well said. So the Flyers' fourth line, again, they have Olli Liksell stepping in for Ryan Poehling since the injury. I did think prior to the injury, I thought the line looked good. And again, they were kind of scoring in odd situations, but they were definitely driving play. Poehling's speed definitely helps, having Lawton and Hathaway on his wings, who both have size and are gritty. I think it really works for a fourth line, and it becomes a strength for the team. Now, Liksell played a team low 8 minutes and 45 seconds against the Devils. Didn't particularly have a great game, but he also hasn't really like been bad. But it does kind of make me think like, should like Anthony Richard be on this fourth line instead of Olli Liksell? He's back. He's healthy again with the Phantoms. He had a couple points the other night. So like I don't love Liksell as a fourth line player, but I understand why they want to get a long look at him, right? He's kind of earned that look, and he's not at a breaking point, but he's at a point where you kind of have to see what you have in him contract wise. But I think they've been okay. I mean, they weren't. I mean, I guess they were a -1 against the Devils, but I wouldn't say they were awful. Just wasn't their best game, but it definitely is a line that benefits with Poehling on there because Poehling's been playing well, especially since he played on the top line and being rotated back down. He kind of took that energy. He's probably best served in a bottom six role just for the type of players he plays against. But I love the fourth line when it is together. Hopefully we can get them together again soon, but if not, I just don't know how long Olli Liksell is going to last playing a fourth line role in this team. He's not necessarily bad defensively, but I don't know if he sticks out. He's kind of just like a neutral.
I also just don't know if his role is more of like a fourth line role. I think he might be better like in a third line, more offensive type role. So it might be better, not even an Anthony Richard, but maybe you see like a guy like a Zayd Wisdom get a shot to just be that energy guy in a fourth line. I think that would be interesting, right? Because I think that's what you're looking for that from that fourth line, like of a Lawton Hathaway combination, and then maybe being like more of a physical tone setting line that kind of just gets in the zone, forechecks really hard, cycles around, tries to kind of put the pressure on other defenses, tire them out a bit. But yeah, they were pretty good last game. So I just think at this point that's kind of going to be the line that'll be more makeshift. The other three are going so well, they're not going to really break anything up. So we'll see where that goes, and hopefully Poehling can return because I do think it is better to see Lawton on the wing. He's a little bit more effective there.
Yeah.
Than at center.
It's nice to have though.
Yeah,
we can shift him there.
Yeah, I do have some random stats just to mention.
Sure, please.
Just kind of from the Devils game here, like going back to the Cates line, right? 14 points for Cates in his last 16 games. This kind of speaks to what we were saying earlier about him. Like he's just been another level. I think at first we thought this was a little bit of a hot streak when it was like 6 points in like 8 games and stuff like that. But now to be doing it, almost a point a game for 16 games here, it's obviously a consistent thing. So I'm just, excited to kind of see where he can take his game the rest of the season, right?
He's a top tier two-way player. When he's on his game, I mean, without a doubt, like if he can sustain this, we're not going to be talking about Noah Cates as like an afterthought. We're going to be talking about it as like, oh, just a good player plays in the bottom six. We're going to be talking about him as a weapon against the team's top players.
Well, just think about how effective it could be. Like if you're the Flyers hypothetically, and you eventually get that bona fide number one center, you had your Luchenko slotted in a two, and imagine Kate's in this the way he's playing right now as a 3C. Like that, that's crazy depth potentially.
I think Cates could age like a fine wine too.
Yeah,
Like he
definitely.
doesn't play a speed game,
No.
right? He's not overly physical, but he is strong, right?
Yeah.
He's very good at winning puck battles, like Couturier, like especially Couturier in
Definitely,
his
yeah.
prime. And I think about the type of player he is. It's like he probably will be best when he's like 29 years old. So he's
Yeah,
still
well, I think he's
4
just gonna
years
keep
away from
getting.
that.
I think he's just going to keep getting better at this point. At least that's what it looks like the
Yeah.
trajectory is like, because each year he's kind of been improving here so
He,
far. So
he probably is
yeah,
one of the most underrated players in the NHL, if not the most, because I don't think most people around the NHL are even aware of how good he
no,
actually is
I just
because of
think
his
it's the
lack of
fact.
production
Yeah, I just
and
think
the
people aren't
injuries.
a well, yeah, I just think people aren't aware, Yariv, because they're not seeing much offensive production, so they don't know how good the defensive game is just because they aren't watching and
Right.
looking out for it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, just some other random stuff for that Devils game, and we'll move on. So the Flyers in that one, they blocked 31 shots, which if you watch the game, they were laying out in front of Urson trying to block a ton of stuff. So
Yeah.
that's kind of their mantra, especially against like higher offense teams, and it's worked for them, and it's worked for Tortorella for years. So it's good to kind of see that pay off for them. Obviously, really strong defensive play. They only limited the Devils to 9 high danger scoring chances in that game. The Flyers had 12 themselves, but still, the Devils are one of the most prolific offensive teams in the league. So the fact they only limited them to 9 high danger chances, and I believe the shot battle was really, really limited as well. Like the Flyers had 18 shots, the Devils 13, so only 13 shots for the Devils in that game. One of the highest powered offenses in the league. The Flyers really played them well. And then another one too is Urson. Like not a lot of saves, only 14 shots, but still made some key stops at key points. So I just wanted to mention that. But yeah, overall, right? Like this last 5-game stretch here has really put them in a spot to potentially get back in that wild card mix. So we'll see what can happen. But
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah. It is interesting. They've been fun to watch again, which thank God. And I got to stay up. Most of the games are at 2 a.m. here.
Which is rough
So,
for you, yeah.
yeah.
At least
Like,
if
yeah,
they're playing well, it's more motivation to stay up and watch versus
yeah,
like seeing them being on like a 6-game losing streak and like, oh man, I gotta
yeah.
stay up and watch just at 2 a.m.
Oh my God. The Islanders game was a risk because I like fell asleep after the first period. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this one can get out of control type of game.
Yeah.
And then I didn't look at the score or anything. I didn't go online until the next morning when I woke up and, watched the rest of the game. And I was like, oh, this was actually awesome.
Yeah.
So it's been good. So it's been making me worth it. And that's what I've been doing. I've been like waiting till the next morning to watch the game. If I can't, manage to stay up, because otherwise I'm up till 5 a.m. and it's like crushing.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the second half of the show. Before we do, just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications. For the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a rating there and a follow if you can. All very much appreciated, and the best way to support our show. For those of you who have done that, thank you all so much. For those who have not, please do so now. Okay, let's talk about the D. I don't know if it's worth going pairing by pairing on this one. I really just want to look at, York and Drysdale, I guess, in the first topic here, both of which who have played better. Now, York obviously was very good in the second half of last year. I'm still hearing Sean Walker was the best defenseman for the Flyers last year. I think that's absolute nonsense. I thought he did a very good job in his role. He did not play against the team's best players. York and Sanheim did, and they both outplayed him. So I want to make that very clear that I do not think Sean Walker was the best player on this team or best defenseman. Otherwise, they would have got more than what they got for him, and they wouldn't have had to take Ryan Johansson. Good defenseman. I like him. I'd be happy to have him back on the team. Definitely think he has a top 4 role on a team, but I don't think he played as well as these guys. York this year has not been as good, but there have been signs. Offensively, he's starting to come back. Defensively, better, but not great. Drysdale, on the other hand, has been much more impactful offensively. Even if he's not producing as much, he has been producing some points of late, especially because the power play has been chipping in a little bit now. He's just moving the puck a lot better. He's been playing a lot more stable defense. And I'm just really happy with those guys and that they've kind of turned it around, which I do think is part of this turnaround, specifically York and Drysdale, because they're both so crucial to get them to play at a high level. I think York, I wouldn't put too much stock into this season and be like, this is who he is. People love to do that. I expect an even better season from him next year. I don't expect like as much struggle. He's going to be a little bit older. Again, he's also young. He's only a year older than Drysdale. And then, Drysdale really starting to come along here. And their point production still pretty low. They're both on pace for like a 30-point season, which is not like amazing. But, you look at a 25% improvement, you're talking about 45-point seasons. That's a lot more what we're looking at from both. So I'm still on the get York on the power play thing, but the fact that Risto's played so well, I'm also understanding that. We'll talk about Risto, but what are your thoughts about Drysdale and York?
Yeah, so I think for York, right, like obviously that pairing with Sanheim is their number one bona fide pairing. I just think over the past couple of games, especially against some top tier teams, they've done a really good job limiting opponents. Like that line, had a ton of usage against the Panthers, obviously against Matthew Tkachuk, Alexander Barkov, Sam Reinhart. The fact that they only limited the Panthers to 3 goals and beat them just speaks volumes about how that pairing's playing against the top team defending champs, and then against the Devils, right? They only limited the Devils to 13 shots. That has to do with the way that they played a lot of their top tier players like Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, and such defensively, right? Sanheim, York, huge factors in limiting both those teams and both these wins for the Flyers, right? I just think the way that they're winning board battles. They're coming away with the puck more often than not when they're on the ice in these battles. Also, too, they're just rushing the puck up the ice really effectively, right? I think it's easy to see, like when you see Sanheim and York up the ice, if it's not Sanheim rushing it up, you have York doing the same essentially. So both of them, I think, have been playing really well, and it's just shown from the results this past 5-game stretch. In terms of Drysdale, I just think for Drysdale right now, it's the confidence level. You're seeing it really rise, right? And I think it's less of the offense, because I think he's known himself, and also the team is aware that offensively he has the skills, the skating ability. I think it's just more holding his own defensively, and I think he's looked a lot better to me. And it's not even the fact that like he's making big plays defensively or doing anything like out of the ordinary, but it's just like general run of the mill board battles. I just think he's looked a lot stronger on pucks in those board battles, being able to win those board battles, not be overmatched. Like even on that play the other night against the Devils, or yesterday against the Devils, when he took a penalty on the breakaway there, that holding penalty. Like, sure, he took that penalty, but that's a smart penalty to take, right? Like, you would want him to take a penalty like that. Whereas I think in other situations, he either like wasn't being aggressive enough on a player, or was trying to use his stick too much. Where sometimes you need to take the body, even though you're like a smaller defenseman of his nature. But I think he's been doing that more often, where you're seeing take the body on guys into the boards, more willing to go and engage in board battles and kind of be in those dirty areas around the net to free up pucks. But yeah, offensively too, I just think, first of all, the power play, the facilitation by him, I think has been a lot crisper. Just moving the puck around there, just also rushing the puck up the ice, knowing when to kind of join in. I think at certain points earlier in the season, he wasn't exactly sure, okay, is this the time for me to join into the rush right now? Or am I going to kind of, leave my other defense partner out to the dry, or leave the team out to dry? I think you're seeing a lot more of those pinches be more calculated, and it's paying off, right? Just in terms of the Flyers, sustaining some offensive zone shifts, sustaining certain pucks in the zone that they might have not earlier in the season. So both guys have been playing really, really well. And then one thing to mention for the Sealer and Drysdale defensive pairing, right now, they're actually the 26th best defensive pairing in the NHL, and that's in terms of expected goals percentage. So this is courtesy of Money Puck. They have a 60.7 expected goals percentage rating. So that that's just showing, right, when or no, 60.6%, sorry, but yeah, 60.6% expected goals percentage rating, but that's just showing essentially that when they're on the ice, the Flyers are controlling the puck more often and controlling the play more often. So the fact that they're in that, top 26 or top 26 in the league right now in terms of defensive pairings, like I wouldn't have expected to see that. So that's really great stuff.
Yeah, it's nice to see when you see some good analytics behind it. Sealer has not had as good of a season he was last year, but he's also dealt with some injuries, and he's still been reliable. The guy who stuck out the most, and we know Sanheim has played well. We could talk about him all day.
Yeah, exactly.
He's still doing what he's doing. Zamula has improved. He has not really made any like terrible plays. He's not getting beat. He looks very different than he did in the beginning of the season. So that's also really nice to see. But let's be honest, the team high in minutes, a guy who we've watched his minutes. I think he's the clear number 3 on this team. Some nights playing as the number 2 on a different line. But Rasmus Ristolainen. Now, Tortorella even talked about him in his presser. I think it was game or two ago before the Devils game. And he talked about, how he had such a bad rap on him and how people kept talking about his contract. It's been 3 years of him playing well. He missed time, unfortunately, last season, a lot of time due to injury, which is my only real knock on him. Outside of that, he's been really good. Under John Tortorella, he's been
just
really
solid.
Good.
He's just solid at this point. Like, he's not going to give you a ton of stuff offensively. He can play an offensive role if needed, though. Like, if you put him into that role to be on the power play, he can do it. He's not going to be the greatest. I just think the defensive player, right? Like, just his ability, firstly, to use his size to his advantage. I think if you watched Ristolainen in Buffalo, which I did a lot, just because, like, think about how many years he played there. You just would see him all the time, and he would kind of eat up so many minutes for that team, and he was doing everything for that team at that point. He just had to do so much on that team. I think the fact that he's now in a role where he doesn't have to do everything for the first time in his career, you're seeing it pay off, right? Like, he doesn't have to be the number 1 defenseman, and you're seeing him use these facets of his game that he wasn't kind of able to use beforehand, like be more physical, be more that defensive shutdown guy. And I think it's paying off. The Flyers have kind of turned him into that, right? But yeah, just his ability to close out pucks using his size, really strong stick and board battles, just closing guys out like behind the net too, in front of the net. Like, he's just doing a really good job in all that. And I think another thing too is he's that calming force right now for Zamula. And it's showing in Zamula's play. And we kind of talked about this before the show that, you're not really noticing Zamula that much, to be honest, in the last couple of games. But I think for the way Zamula plays, it's a good thing, right? If you're not noticing him, it's a good thing. I think Zamula's been just really crisp with the breakout passes out of his zone. He's not hesitating as much, right?
He's not getting beat.
Exactly. We're kind of seeing the things that the coaching staff was looking for him to implement. We're kind of seeing that come to fruition where he's making plays quicker, he's thinking quicker, and that's resulting in him not getting beat as quickly to pucks in his own zone and being able to break the puck out quicker. So I just think that Zamula-Risto pairing is working. And right now, like, I think we were kind of in a point earlier in the season where we weren't really sure how these pairings were going to go at a point. But now, all 3 pairs are rolling. All 3 pairs are working, and all 3 offensive lines too. So I think this is probably, if you look at the full roster of the lineup and how it's kind of shook out, this is probably the most consistent we've seen all lines offensively and defensively look this season, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And there's a lot of talk. Like, I heard Kevin Kurz on Nasty Knuckles and how he thinks that. I think you're probably more in this camp too. I don't want to put your words in your mouth, Vasili, but that the Flyers are looking to move him. Ristolainen. Yeah, look, and he kind of brought up towards his press conference and how he brought it almost like Torts was defending not trading him, like in front of everybody. I don't think that's what is going on, to be honest with you, dude. I think it's more likely that Nick Sealer gets traded than Rasmus Ristolainen. And here's my thought behind it. You look at the identity of this team, what Risto brings. There's 0 other defensemen in the organization outside of maybe Hunter McDonald, who is not even close to ready to do what he does. He is part of the identity of this team. They want to build from the back end out. They want size. They don't have enough size on the back end. And moving your biggest, most effective defensive defenseman when he's not at the end of his contract and he's not at the end of his game, and the Flyers don't plan on tanking, I'm not saying it can't happen. If it gets traded, we know why, you know. But I look at all those factors and I go, I do not believe. I think the Flyers will listen to offers on him, especially if they get blown away, and they get a first round. Like if they get an offer that what the Flyers gave up to get him, I think they would be very interested.
Yeah, first and a second type thing.
Right.
We kind of talked about this before, right? Like
Right.
I think if it's an overpay right now for Risto, like a first and a second like that, they would consider. I think if it was just a first round pick on the table at this point with the way he's playing, they probably wouldn't do it. He's just playing so well, and they're on a bit of a run. My only thought is this might not be the year for them even to think about doing it, right? And I look at your point with the contract. The contract's not expiring. Other teams might not, even though I think he's playing well above the value of the contract right now. I think he's, exceeded that in terms of what he's bringing at this point. And it's crazy how everybody thought it was a huge overpay when it was first signed, but really it's looking like a pretty good deal for what he's bringing.
Sure.
But yeah, I was just going to say, like, I think the fact it's not an expiring deal, I think maybe they'll look to potentially move him maybe next year. Like, we'll see. I just think he's playing so well. So they'd have to be blown away by an offer. Like if they're completely out of the mix, maybe about, trade deadline comes around, sure, it becomes more feasible, more realistic. I don't expect them to be completely out of the mix. So we'll see what happens, right? I think maybe next year might be more realistic for Risto, or maybe even during the offseason, because sometimes you got to look at the money situation. It might be easier for a team to fit $5 million in the summer when they're kind of restructuring their roster versus doing it at the trade deadline. Sometimes it can be difficult. So we'll see. But just, another thing to jump off with Risto and Zamula, like another thing with the expected goals, like they're the 48th pairing in the NHL right now in terms of expected goals percentage, 57.7%. Like I don't think anybody would have expected a Zamula Ristolainen pairing to be a top 50 pairing in the league for expected goals percentage this year. Like that just shows how well they're playing. So if the Flyers do trade him, it's going to have to be something that likely blows them away, or at the minimum a first round pick. But I think if they were looking to get a first for him, I can't see why teams wouldn't pay up for that with the way that he's kind of performing at this point.
I think they would absolutely have to. Again, I just go with the identity of the team and what would happen to this defense without him. And people could say, oh, well, we don't care if they're worse. Well, you don't care, but I don't think the organization thinks that way. I don't think the Flyers are looking to move Rasmus Ristolainen. I would not be. I don't even think a late first round pick would even do it for me at this point, just because I would look at what I'm doing to my defense. I would look more to move a guy like Zamula, who I know I have a replacement for in Andre, right? Like, that's the type of guy, or Nick Seeler, who plays a bottom pairing role on this team. That's a guy I'd be willing to move.
A lot easier to replace the bottom pair defenseman. Even though you love Seeler and you love what he brings, there's always guys that can bring similar elements that you can find in free agency, right?
Yeah, exactly. Easier to replace. And I don't know if they're trying to move either one of them, to be honest with you. I think we're going to have a lot less of a firework.
I think it's status quo. I think it's status quo at the trade deadline, personally, in terms of who they move, unless they fall off a cliff here, which is possible, or they get blown away on something. And at that point, I mean, if you do get blown away by an offer and it's a complete overpayment, you'd be stupid not to take it.
Yeah, right? I think they're more likely to move Scott Laughton than they are Rasmus Ristolainen.
Yeah, I agree on that as well. Especially too, I don't know if people heard Elliot Friedman's latest comments on the Laughton situation. But yeah, he essentially stated that, the Flyers are looking for an overpay for Laughton, which we're all well aware of. But Friedman said that, he's heard more people thinking that, hey, like the Flyers would be open to it if they did get what they were looking for.
Yeah.
So we'll see if they do get that, but who knows? Like, I haven't really been looking at the trade deadline trade board yet because it's just a little bit too early, but I would imagine, if the pickings are slim and you see a lot of moves getting made before deadline day, which has happened the past couple of seasons, that could be kind of where the Flyers sneak in maybe and Laughton becomes a premium asset. But it has to fall a certain way, I think, for something like that to happen. So we'll see. But I do agree that I think for the Flyers and where they're at and the makeup and the construction of the team, just in terms of, okay, if you remove something, how much of a detriment is it going to have going forward and how difficult will it be to replace? I think replacing a guy like a Ristolainen and what he's bringing on the ice is going to be a lot harder than what Lawton might bring for you currently.
Yeah, like personally, if I was asking for a trade for Risto, and maybe it's not this year, maybe it's when he has a little less term, I'd be asking for like a B plus prospect and a first round pick, and people might scoff at that. I'm like, okay, go find another top 4 defender who's 6'5", right handed, and can put up points. I was like, good luck. He's had such a bad reputation here because of him leaving Buffalo, but he has done nothing in the Flyers jersey to warrant that reputation.
No,
absolutely nothing.
Good.
He's been really good from the beginning.
He's been really good, and you have to factor in too, like he's never really played on a team that's actually been a good team.
Yeah,
like not to say that this Flyers team is bad, but like they're
better than Buffalo was when he was on them.
Yeah, but I just mean like he hasn't played on like a top tier team, is what I'm saying.
No, never.
So that's what I always wonder as well, is like if you put him in a top 4 on like a top 10 team in this league, and you're that team trying to trade for him, like how good could he look there for you, right? So you have to think about that relative value to the team that's acquiring him. So, and
when Andre was at the top of his game, you have the stats in front of you. I know you sent it to me.
I'll bring it up. Yeah.
How good was that pairing? Imagine you put him with a legitimate, number 3 defenseman in the NHL.
Yeah, it's crazy
or number
to think
2.
this. So I was pulling up all those, money puck expected goal stats for the Sealer-Drysdale pair, Zamula-Risto pair. So you had the Sealer-Drysdale pair was 27th in the league expected goals. Risto and Zamula were 48th. Still to this day, the Andre Ristolainen pairing is 21st in expected goals percentage, 61.9% on the season. And it's crazy to think that they're still the 21st pairing in the league in terms of expected goals percentage, because they firstly haven't played together in weeks at this point.
Yeah.
And it wasn't all that
and
long.
Andre's a rookie.
Yeah, so like they played really, really well together. So yeah, just proves your point. Firstly, how good Ristolainen has been this season from a defensive standpoint, and just in controlling play when he's out there on the ice. Like usually when he's out on the ice, the other teams aren't getting high quality chances, and the Flyers are getting more of those opportunities.
Yeah, and Andre is a better defenseman than Zamula. But he's I know a lot of people were like trying to create this false narrative that he was the reason the Flyers were winning. No, it's the team was playing better when Andre was here. But Andre's better performance, because he's better than Zamula, his ceiling is higher. When you couple it with how good Risto has been, his numbers were outrageously good. And I think that is why you keep a guy like Rasmus Ristolainen, because think about when Andre does come back up. He is part of the long-term plan here. The Flyers have stated that over, and is a big reason why they didn't take Zeev Boyum, right? It was him, Drysdale, and York. And I don't know. I'm not tempted to move Risto at all, especially not for a late first-round pick. Like, I'd be lucky to find another Risto with that type of pick. So at this point, I think Risto is becoming ingrained in the Flyers culture. So let's talk about a guy who is probably... You could make the argument as the most responsible for the Flyers turnaround. He was out for injuries. He's had an up and down year. When he's been healthy, he's been good. He's had some health issues, and when they were getting in the way, he wasn't good enough. His numbers are starting to creep into respectable levels. He's just under an .890 save percentage, so it is creeping back up. His goals against average are, I think it's 2.97, if I remember correctly.
Maybe. 2.79.
2.7, even better.
Yeah.
So his goals against are starting to become respectable, and Sam Ersson obviously earned a shutout against Anaheim. He almost had a shutout against San Jose when he got injured in that game. Again, injuries have still been a problem, and it's a good thing we have 2 backups behind him. So it's kind of like the Risto thing, right? Like, injuries have been the thing that held him back, and that's a reality, and you can't be a legit number 1 guy if you have injury problems. However, his play of late, and Tortorella even, Charlie O'Connor did a good job of asking this question if he thought that the biggest change, because Torts didn't think they were playing that poorly, but he asked, is the biggest change that you're getting better goaltending? And he said yes. And I actually think that's true. And I think his goaltending, especially, I know you remember this, right? The Frost turnover. Like, Frost was having a good game in that terrible turnover, and then Ersson makes behind the net. completely gorgeous saves in a row. That's what Sam Ersson can be for this team if he can stay healthy. Again, he's got a respectable goals against. He's got a winning record. I think he's 13-7. Um, has a good record. Got to get a save percentage up, but he has been the number one center clear cut or number one goaltender clear cut at this point, and it's very important to see, even if he's not the future number one goalie of this team, and let's say it is of Ragan, right, when he comes over here, to know that you have a 1B in Ersson, which I still think he can be a starter. He's still young, right? He's 25.
This is only his real first starting or season as a starter in the NHL, right? Like for anybody to say that, oh, this guy's not a starter in the league, he's never had a chance to start in the league. Firstly, this is his first chance to do it. So I mean, sometimes it can take a couple seasons to really cement yourself and get accustomed to what it takes to be that starting goalie. So I think Ersson's well on his way to doing that, but like there's definitely points in this season where he was struggling. I think that's more surrounding the injuries than his play, to be honest. Like I thought early in the season, before he got injured, firstly he was on a heater going into that first injury, and then kind of after that, when he tried to come back from it, is when the game was falling off a little bit. So it can be tough to come back from an injury right back into the thick of things. Like I think for Ersson, the first important thing is that he's giving them the saves when they're needed, right? Like team is making a turnover or the team is getting hemmed in their own end, they're not necessarily forced into the thinking, or like the players in front of him aren't like, oh no, we're gonna let one in now, right? Like that thought isn't creeping into the back of their minds, and that I think is showing on the ice. I think when you have a team playing in front of a goalie that's afraid that the goalie is going to let in weak goals all the time, it really shows into how they're like trying to create offense. I think the fact that the Flyers, have been playing better these last couple of games, I think they have more confidence than Ersson, in my opinion, than Fedotov or Kolosov. So I think that's a big part of it. I just think too, like look at that Devils game, right? And that sequence with Frost that you mentioned. There were a couple sequences in that game, especially the third period when it was 1-1, where the Devils were hemming them in big time, and Ersson was kind of keeping them in it with some big saves, even though they were getting hemmed in. And I don't know if the other goalies would have been able to give them those same types of saves in those same scenarios if they were getting hemmed in the way they were. So that's where I think, Ersson just playing the way he has been so crucial, because there has been points in the Florida game, points in the Islanders game, points in the Devils game where they won, where they were getting pinned in, but he still made saves during those times where they were getting, trapped in the defensive zone, whereas the other goalies, I think, in those scenarios might have not been able to come up with those saves. So I think that's huge. I also think Fedotov just cementing himself as the backup here is huge, because you kind of have some consistency in net, right? I think the team just knowing that Ersson's going to be there for them consistently, and that they're seeing the same for Fedotov lately, because even the past games that he's played against the Leafs and Columbus, he's looked pretty good and has been steady. So just to get some stabilizing nature in net is, gone a long way for this team. And then just to close out on Ersson, like if you look at his numbers, if you go back to the December 28th matchup against Anaheim, right? He had a .970 save percentage in that game. Next game he plays is the game against San Jose, where he gets the shutout and gets pulled for the injury. Comes back against Dallas, .864 save percentage. But that's a real tough game to come back in, after being hurt, and against an upper echelon team against the Stars. Then you go to Anaheim, get a shutout. .870 save percentage against Florida, the defending champs. Like, he played a good game. I don't look at the .870 on that. That's whatever. And then the Islanders, .897, also played a good game. Then .923 here against the Devils. Like, I just think this last stretch, right, ever since coming back, and even that Anaheim game late in December, like, he's looked really, really good. So I think it's, if you look at the latest, last stretch of games here, what is that? That's like last 6 games he's played, he's really trending upwards. So I think it's a positive thing for the Flyers, and it's positive for Ersson, because we see in the past, right, when he starts to get hot and starts to feel it, he can really go on a run and look like a top tier goalie. So hopefully that's the case here for them going ahead, because they have a really crucial stretch coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Okay, let's get to our last segment, and we'll wrap it up from there. So, big news for Jet Luchenko. He has been named the 33rd captain of the Guelph Storm. This goes back to the rumors that he's probably not getting traded. That looks to be the case. So it looks like he's going to finish his juniors career with the Guelph Storm. He will most likely be on the Flyers next year. He also played a game last night. He had a goal and an assist and a +2 rating. He was also 12 for 19 on the faceoff dot in a game where his team lost 6-2 to the Saginaw Spirit. Zane Parekh was first star with a hat trick and 2 assists. The defenseman is continuing what he's doing again on a
I'm sure they should have left him off Team Canada.
Yeah, great. Team Canada, they got some mirrors to look into for sure. But yeah, congrats to Jet Luchenko. No surprise really that he was named captain. He is the backbone of that team. He's by far the best player on it.
I would say it's more of like a parting gift almost for him because I don't expect him to be.
I think they know that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't expect him to be in the OHL going ahead. He's likely going to be on the Flyers next season. So I think it's just great to see for Jet. He obviously was a great player for all his seasons in the OHL with the Guelph. So I think this is a great way to kind of send him off and end his kind of junior career here for his final season with the Storm. It sucks that we didn't get to see him move to like a competitive team to kind of have a playoff run. I think that would have been probably the best thing for his development. But I do wonder, like, interesting. I'm gonna put this out there
because their season ends early.
Their season's gonna end early. Guelph's real bad.
I just read your mind, like via 5,000 miles, dude.
I know, right? Jet Luchenko, I think he played 4 games for the Flyers this season. So I'm interested to see, like, if he might get back to the Flyers here to end the season, and if it's possible for him to get into some games. I wonder, right? We'll see what happens.
Did he play for the Phantoms?
No,
I don't think so.
He's 19,
right?
Or he's 18. He'd have to be 19. He's not even
19 yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
so he had to be 19 because of that the rule between the OHL and AHL.
I think you're right, though. Especially if they move Lawton at the trade deadline.
Yeah, I could totally see it. Especially, I think if the Flyers are firmly out of the playoff mix too, like we'll see it for sure. If they're in the hunt up until last day or something, I don't know if they're going to want to insert him into that at this point.
But he was with them I agree with that sentiment, but just look at the beginning of he's with them in training camp. He knows the team. It's kind of like a caveat to that thought because normally I do completely agree with you, but they're not bringing in a stranger.
No. I just wonder, in the sense that, like, would they want to play him? Like, they might bring him to join the team. I don't know if they'll play. Sure. I don't know if they'll play him.
No, you might be right. Yeah,
right?
I think that's probably inaccurate because the intensity is going to be. But they might want him to see it also.
Yeah, be around the team during that time, and
especially
just say, like, this is what's happening. I also don't know about the rules. Like, we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but, like, I don't know. Like, if the Flyers were to make the playoffs, does it only work for regular season games? I'm pretty sure. I don't think you can burn his ELC if he plays in the playoffs. So.
I don't think you can burn his ELC in the playoffs, but you can burn it in the regular season.
Yeah,
you might not want to do that.
Yeah, so he had 5 games left if they did bring him back. So something to think about, but I just thought it's interesting.
But they could pepper him in there for maybe 2 or 3 games. They didn't have to use up the 5. But just to get him around the team, especially because it's... Look, they're not going to tell us this publicly, but the reality is they are somewhat penciling him into the lineup. He still has to make the team again next year. But I think in their mind, they're like, he could very well make the team. And I'm going to bring up another player that's not on our list here that also could be on the Flyers next year who doesn't have a contract. And I wonder if he's going to make his way over to the Phantoms at the end of the year. But Alex Bump, he had a 3-goal weekend this past weekend. He is now point-per-game player, 9 goals, 11 assists. His production has gone up.
He's having a good season.
Yeah,
he's having a good season, but it also begs the question, right? Like we saw Brent Flair mention that, they view him as an NHL player. So if that's the case, you're expecting a contract at some point. So I firmly expect the Flyers. Yeah, I firmly expect the Flyers to sign him, likely after this season. Will he join the Flyers? Once again, another thing that's interesting to me. Like, is that a guy you want to insert here potentially?
No, but they could play him on the Phantoms.
Oh, for sure, yeah. But I wonder even maybe, for example, you have a Paling out right now. Like, who knows how long he's going to be out, but let's say you had a guy like that who's out, maybe you bring a bump in that you sign at some point in like March or April, who knows?
I think that's definitely possible. I'm not going to say it's not possible. But I look at Bump's position, they could do similar to what they did with Hunter McDonald, right? Where they give him an AHL deal to finish out the season.
Yeah.
And then they kickstart his ELC the following year. I can't see them letting Bump walk unless he refuses to come
No, yeah.
here.
That's
I
the
think
most likeliest scenario, I think. Like he's obviously gonna finish his season out at this point and then probably
join the Phantoms.
finish up with the Phantoms. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully he'll have time to play for the Phantoms. I'd love to see what he can do against pro athletes. We've been excited about him for a while. So he's like an under the radar prospect that I think most people have no idea about, but he is a guy who could probably walk into the league when he's ready, which could be next year. And he could be in the NHL and be one of those guys who puts up like 25, 30 points in his rookie year. Like
you're surprised, like, who is this guy?
Yeah, who is Alex Bump? But why does he have 15 goals on the year? He's a shooter, right? He's a shooter with good size, good playmaking ability, responsible defensively. So I got to keep an eye on him. And that's an important one. Also, Noah Powell, he did start his OHL career. When I wrote this, he was a point per game, but it looks like he didn't put up a point last game. He is now 3 points in 4 games in the OHL, 1 goal, 2 assists. Has scored a beauty of a first goal. Again, he's adjusting, but I do expect that productivity to actually increase as he moves forward. It's an interesting move because he went kind of like an easier route with the level of competition, but I think he wanted to work on his offensive game, and obviously he's getting to do that now because prior to that, he was playing a defensive checking role in college hockey. He put up 5 points in 17 games, which is not too bad for a 19-year-old rookie. But OHL, I think we really want to see him build his offensive game a little bit more. So it's been interesting. Thoughts on Powell?
Yeah, it's good to see Powell go to the OHL in a sense. I think he just wasn't getting the opportunities offensively at the NCAA. He might have been a little bit not to say out of his element, but I do think that he was playing more of like a checker type role, whereas on Oshawa, it seems like it's more offensive. Like I believe he's playing with Callum Ritchie already, so that's their top center.
Yep.
Was a top player for them, for Canada at the World Juniors. So I think just to develop his offensive game, the ability to play with a guy like Ritchie, like for the rest of the season, I think that's a real positive for him. So
yeah,
and Beckett Seneke as well is on that team with the Generals. So there's some high powered offensive guys that were just selected in this last draft or in the last couple drafts here. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of if Powell can develop more playing with those guys.
Yeah. Absolutely. Also, I'm going to pepper a little bit of stuff in here before we end. So Denver Barkey had a shorty recently, beautiful shorthanded goal. He's still killing it. 53 points in 33 games. What else we got here? Cole Knuble is still doing well. 25 points in 20 games, 9 goals, 16 assists. Not so much what I wanted to talk about. Again, Anthony Richard is back. He's got 19 points in 18 games, so 3 points in the last 2 games since he returned, or 2 points in 2 games. Alexis Gendron's still putting up points. He now has 18 points in 33 games, so I'm very interested. Again, we've been talking about him nonstop.
Yeah.
Jack Berglund is still injured. Helge Grans scored the other night. Now 6 goals on the season, 16 points in 35 games. So that's good to see. Ethan Sansom scored again, so he still leads the Phantoms in goal scoring from the defense, 7 goals, 6 assists. So that's pretty good to see as well. And I think that's primarily it as far as updates. I don't think we have too much.
Yeah, we've done full-blown updates the last couple weeks, so not much has changed in terms of the prospects, but we're seeing some good stuff from a lot of them, so hopefully we see it continue for the rest of the season, especially Denver Barkey and Bonk, right, have just been killing it with the Knights, so I'm sure that's going to continue.
Yeah, that team's too good. They got to get
I hope they
get
can
them
win
over here.
Yeah, I feel like those guys are definitely Phantoms bound. I hope for the Knights and their sake and Barkey and Bonk's sake that they can actually get the Memorial Cup win this season because they've fallen short. The last 2 seasons, it's like heartbreak for these guys. They have like almost not perfect seasons, but basically, and then get to that point at last, chance to win the Memorial Cup and then have lost 2 seasons in a row. So hopefully they can close it out this year.
Yeah, let's hope. And if not, come over to the Phantoms. We need the help. All right. That's the end of this week's show. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
No, just, I think we're all excited here, obviously, for the kind of run to the playoffs that's going to take place. Like the stretch run, the hockey gets even more intense. So just, continue to keep listening. We're going to keep covering the team every week. There's articles on flyersnittygritty.com coming all the time, from myself, from Jamie Basco, from a bunch of our other writers that are doing an amazing job. So we just want to thank you all for the support and continuing to listen to the show throughout the season here. And we're going to wind you down into the end of the season and give you the best Flyers coverage we possibly can.
Absolutely. Well said. All right, that's it for us. Just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications. If you're not subscribed at this point, please, 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 please do so. For the audio versions, go to Spotify and iTunes, and give us a rating there if you can, and a review or whatever. But all that is incredibly, incredibly helpful and the best way to support this show. And also, shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Also, Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for your insurance adjustment need. They will help you facilitate the process between you and your insurance company. Again, Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And shout out to Sports Spider, our partner. They aggregate articles, videos, podcasts, pretty much anything you're looking for about the Flyers, about the NHL, about all sports together. They are our partners. They drive traffic to our site. We hope that you guys can take advantage of what they have. Our stuff is pinned at the top when we release it, so you can always find us pretty easily there. All right. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Vasili. Killed it, and thank you for working with me on the time differences. We appreciate you guys. We love you. And remember, always stay gritty.